Hi, everybody, and welcome to our topic of smaller things in the solar system. Right, so we've covered a lot of the stuff in astronomy, but one last thing is, well, there's some smaller things hanging around out there in the solar system flying around too. So we've got things like a comet, right, which is what I have the picture of up right now. A comet is a small icy chunk of rock basically flying around through the solar system just like everything else, it's orbiting the sun, or our sun in our case, or whatever the star is. And comets are famous because when they get close to the sun, basically the water that's been frozen on it, or well, the gases that have been frozen on it, they start melting, and then they kind of like fly off into space away from the star that they're circling around. Right, so this is an actual photograph of what a comet looks like. Now, this is a really big one. Normally, they might look kind of more like one of the stars with a little streak behind it and everything. But this is just a photograph of an actual comet, right? So here's the little tiny animation of it kind of flying around the star. The big key thing is that the tail of the comet always goes away from the star because it's basically all that radiation, all that solar wind that's coming off of the star in all directions. That's what's causing that tail to happen. So at one point, like over here, the comet's literally following its tail, because the solar winds are moving faster than even the comet is, right? And so that's kind of the big thing that's going on with it. Here you go. Here's another kind of animation picture of the comet. So like here, the tail is actually first, and the comet's following the tail in that situation right there. So let me show you a short little video talking about comets really quick.
Hi, I'm Emerald Robinson. In this What Is video, we explore comets, those unique streaks of light in our night sky that rarely visit us. Comets are icy objects typically ranging a few miles in size, which orbit our sun. Their highly elliptical orbits carry them from close to the sun all the way to the outer edges of the solar system. When a comet gets close to the sun, its outer layers of ice melt and evaporate, creating an atmosphere of gas and dust around the comet. This atmosphere is called a coma. Radiation from the sun pushes some of this atmosphere into a long tail. A comet's tail always points away from the sun, no matter which way the comet is moving. Gases in the coma and tail of the comet reflect light from the sun, giving comets their familiar appearance. But comets are very dark and hard to see when they aren't near the sun. The time between one visit near the sun and the next is called the comet's period. The first comet whose period was known was Halley's Comet. Its period is 75 years. Halley's Comet last traveled through the inner solar system in 1986. Comets with periods of 200 years or less are called short period comets. Short period comets are from a region beyond the orbit of Neptune called the Kuiper Belt. The Kuiper Belt is home to comets, asteroids, and dwarf planets. Long period comets have periods of thousands or even millions of years. Most long period comets come from a very distant region of the solar system called the Oort cloud. The Oort cloud is about 50,000 to 100,000 times the distance from the sun to
Oops, sorry, I cut it off the last couple seconds. All right, so those are what comets are in our solar system. The next one to talk about is an asteroid. All right, so an asteroid is yet again another big chunk of rock kind of floating around out there in space, right? Still usually kind of orbiting around the star, in our case, the sun and everything. But the big thing with an asteroid is well that it's big, right? They're very very large and everything, right? So if you think of an asteroid, I mean oftentimes you're talking about something and you might say like it's the size of Connecticut or something like that. So an asteroid, if it's used correctly, it's a really, really large object floating around out there in space for us, right? So the big difference between the two, comet, right? It's basically a dirty ice ball flying around through space, and when it gets close to the sun, it melts, or kind of like fades. The tail kind of like passes, goes away as it's like melting off into space. Whereas the asteroid, it's some kind of really big rock basically floating around out there in space. But there's more, right? It doesn't end there. Oh yeah, here's my picture. If you're on the moon and you see this, what are you gonna say? You say, Houston, you have a problem. Anyway, maybe you get space humor. There's more though, right? There is the meteoroid, right? So a meteoroid is a smallish, I guess is the best way to say, type of thing, kind of flying around through space, right? So A meteoroid is basically just a rock floating around in space. So for these, think like the size of, say, maybe like a car to like a building, So, I mean, they're not tiny like compared to you and I, but I mean, compared to an asteroid, and, an asteroid might be like, you're comparing it to almost like the size of a state, in the country or something like that. Yep. So they're smaller chunks of rock kind of flying around through space. Yep. So the difference, you want to know the difference between these? Comet, dirty chunk of ice flying around through space, has a tail when it's close to the sun. Asteroid, really big thing flying around out there in space. Meteoroid, smaller kind of thing floating around out there in space. But there's more. It doesn't end there, right? There are these guys right here, meteors, right? All that a meteor is just, a meteor, but it comes into contact with Earth's atmosphere, right? And so when it does that, these things are flying through space at incredibly fast speeds and everything, right? And so when they hit the air in our atmosphere, even though air, we think of it as kind of soft and fluffy, if you're moving through it really fast, think like if you take your hand and stick it out the window of your car while it's driving down the highway, right? That push back on your hand. I mean, that's going at like 55 miles an hour, maybe 60 miles an hour. Imagine if you were going like 5,000 miles an hour, right? Your head would just get like chopped right off, like, kind of thing and everything. Well, that's what happens with these meteors. Even though it's a rock, it hits Earth's atmosphere so fast that, either a lot of times they kind of ricochet off. Do I have a picture of that? Here's a picture. There you go. Here are the meteors. This is kind of like a time-lapse film. And here's what they actually look like when they hit the Earth's atmosphere. They're so hot, they're kind of burning up and everything. Usually what happens, here we go. Here's what I was looking for. They're going so fast that even though they hit, Earth's atmosphere or air, it kind of seems soft and fluffy to us. When the rock comes in, it hits it so fast, it just kind of like bounces off, kind of like that. So it's like, boing, kind of thing. And then it bounces off. Wait. There we go. It kind of bounces off, right? That's normally what happens. So when you're seeing, these guys, if you've ever seen a shooting star, that's exactly what it is. It's just a meteor bouncing off our atmosphere. It's kind of cool. Sometimes if you look them up, there are meteor showers. And you can see like, if you're somewhere fairly dark, you could see several of these an hour. You can see like sometimes like 10, 15 of these an hour if you just kind of know where and when to watch them and everything. So there we go. Sometimes, though, they kind of come in at such an angle that they hit the atmosphere and everything. And then as they kind of like go through our atmosphere, basically, usually these are smaller objects. So they're meteors that get tinier and tinier and tinier, right? And they basically burn up in the atmosphere. So they don't really hurt us or anything like that is what happens for those. Right. So that's what the meteor is, right? Object that's basically entering Earth's atmosphere and glows due to friction. It usually either kind of ricochets back out into space or it burns up, it literally disintegrates into nothing. There we go. That was my flying meteor. Okay. So difference between these, you want to make sure you understand the difference, right? Comets, dirty balls of ice, basically they have a tail when they're close to the sun. Asteroid, really big chunk of rock floating around there in space. Meteors, smallerish. I mean, some of them could be as big as a building, but I guess they can get pretty small too and everything. And then meteor, right? Meteoroid means it's just a rock floating out in space. Meteor means it hits Earth's atmosphere. So either it kind of hits it and ricochets off, or it basically hits it and then burns up into nothing. But there's more. It doesn't end there because you have the meteorite, right? Which is the one you got to be careful with and everything, right? Basically, all that a meteorite is, it's a meteor, but it goes all the way through Earth's atmosphere and it smacks into the planet. And this happens fairly often, right? It probably happens every day. We just don't see it because most of Earth is covered in ocean or deserts or jungles or something like that. So meteorite just means it goes all the way through the atmosphere. Now, there's examples of where these have happened, specifically really big ones, right? Most of the time, if it's doing this on a daily basis, I mean, it's like a little tiny pebble or something like that coming, and no one, it's actually hard to find. But every so often, a really big one comes through our atmosphere and smacks into Earth. And there's evidence of this because you've got big craters. This is not a picture of the moon. This is actually a national park that you can go out west and actually visit it. I mean, here's the road coming up to it. Here's where the parking lot is for the visitor center. You used to be able to hike down to the bottom of it, but I'm told that recently you're not allowed to do that anymore. They have like a little observation post that you can look at it. But you can actually go there and visit. All All right, there we go. One that goes through the atmosphere and smashes into the planet, kind of like. Wait, where's my little thing here? Yes, kind of like that. So here you go. Here's the platform that you can stand on, and you can see it made a big crater, out there in Arizona. Ironically enough, they went in and they actually retrieved. This is a fragment of the actual meteorite. If you go there in the visitor center, it's actually still there. You can see the fragment of what it looked like and everything. It's not a particularly big meteorite that hit Earth either, right? There are much bigger ones that have hit in the past. That's where you get into like the thing that made the dinosaurs extinct. I think that was like a really huge meteorite that smashed into our planet and everything. Let me show you. Here's a video from not very long ago, just a couple of years ago, of a meteorite that hit in Russia. No, maybe we can get this to work.
You're watching America This Morning, America's #1 early morning news.
And we have more now on that breaking story this morning. The meteorite bursting through the atmosphere over Russia, injuring hundreds of folks on the ground.
It happened overnight in frigid Siberia, sending shocked residents into a state of panic. ABC's Current Radia filed this report just moments ago.
The meteorite was captured on car dashboard cameras and phones. A blinding flash of light streaking across the sky. And then, on the ground, chaos as fragments slammed into Earth. Witnesses say they thought a war had broken out. The blast shattered windows and knocked down a wall at this zinc factory. Officials say over 250 people were injured, mostly from broken glass. It's extremely cold in this part of Russia, below zero today, and schools closed after the windows were blown out. About 20,000 troops have been sent to the scene, as well as 3 aircraft which are surveying the damage from the sky. Scientists say the meteor shower was not related to an asteroid that will fly dangerously close to Earth today, but one estimate suggested this meteor was big, perhaps tens of tons. Current Radia, ABC News, Moscow.
Ooh, so this is fairly recently going on. Now, they actually tracked where it went, and it actually smacked into a lake not far from the town. Here's the literal hole in the ice that it made as it smashed down in. Later, they went back and they actually fished it out of the lake, and here is the surviving chunk of the meteor. Now, remember, it would have been much, much bigger than that when it was in space. As it went down through the atmosphere, you saw basically smoke coming off of it because that was it burning up as it entered our atmosphere. So this is like the biggest chunk of it that was left at the bottom of the lake when they went back down in and found it. In Russia, there was also another one a long, long time ago, more than 100 years ago, right? And this one, it's still, though, early enough in our history that, they actually have photographs after the thing happened of, it knocked down all the trees and everything like that and left this giant crater. You can actually see the crater on Google Earth and everything. And where the actual meteorite impacted, it hit with such unbelievable force. It basically melted all the ground and turned it into a giant rock. So to this day, trees don't even grow in the area right where it actually smacked in because there's so little dirt there. There's just like some grass growing on top of it and everything. So these meteorites, they do happen and everything. Oh, here's a picture of, the one that I was just showing you, that one right there, it was a really big rock that hit. The one from Russia that we just saw in the video, it was a much smaller one, although, compared to like a plane, it's big, it's bigger than probably your house or anything like that. So the difference, right? You want to know the difference between these guys. Comet, remember, dirty, icy chunk of rock that has a tail when it gets too close to the sun. Asteroid, right? Really, really big rock floating around out there in space. Think like Texas or Montana or something like that. Meteoroid, smallish rock in space. They can get tiny, but they're also, if it's like the size of a big building, it's still usually not considered an asteroid for it. Meteor, right? Basically a meteoroid, but it hits Earth's atmosphere and either burns up or bounces off. And then the one to worry about, meteorite, right? One that smashes all the way through our atmosphere and hits the planet. Now, what happens if you have an asteroid is the question, and it becomes a meteorite? Well, that's not going to be good, right? Now you're talking, like I was saying before, like the dinosaurs kind of thing and everything. That would cause a lot of problems for us. So that would be really, really bad. And that's one thing NASA and a bunch of other people, they constantly are trying to find out, is there one headed towards us that would be so big that it could literally cause, big problems globally and stuff like that. Now, the test, the assessment that we're having, you don't really have to worry about quite as much of this, but some of the things that are going to be on it, right? The 8 planets, you need to know about those. Phases of the moon, that could be on it. Layers of the sun, right? And all those small things, right? That, in addition to all the other stuff that we've done so far this chapter, that's all the stuff in the assessment that you need to be working on this week. All right, I'll see you in class a little bit later. Have a great day.